Hey guys, welcome back to Coding for Real with Neil. I am your host and my name is Neil. This is PHP for Real, where we look at PHP and we apply it to real world scenarios. Now for today's lesson, there's 6 things I want you to remember. The first one is a Pandora bracelet. Okay. Now Pandora bracelets, a lot of people put letters or they put their birthday, they put numbers, and then they connect it on the bracelet kind of like they're strung together. Okay. The next thing that I want you to remember is your phone number. Your phone number is a series of digits. Some people call them integers, but essentially digits. The next thing I want you to remember is your bank account balance. How good would it be if you could double your bank account balance, including the 2 decimals as well? The next thing I want you to remember is a light switch. Have you ever thought about scaring someone by switching off the light switch and going, "Bull light switch"? Remember that. The next thing I would like you to remember is everything that's in your pantry, in your kitchen, and think of how they are arranged. Okay. Think of the arrangement of everything in your pantry. The final thing that I want you to remember is the place that you live in, your place of residence. Remember that it was a blueprint of something, and then that blueprint was created into the object that you currently live in. Anyway, the savvy among you, people with experience, may have realized that we're talking about data types today. It's a really, really exciting lesson, guys. And don't worry, everything that I just said will make sense. There is a method to my madness. I'll see you in the lesson. The first data type that I want to talk to you about is the Pandora bracelet example that I gave you. This data type is known as a string. So a string is just a series of characters strung together. That's why I gave you the Pandora's bracelet example, because it can be numbers, it can be letters, but they're strung together. Now, it's always inside quotes, but a string can be inside single quotes or it can be inside double quotes. So if we put here and we create a variable called string1 and we make that equal to hello world. Okay, so that is a string. And we could also create another variable called string2 and we can make that equal to, let's put this one in single quotes. Let's put in here like and subscribe. Okay. Then if we wanted to echo this out, we could echo out string1. And then we're going to concatenate by using a dot. And then we're going to put here string2. And then what you will get in your browser is this. You'll get hello world, like and subscribe in 2 separate strings. The second data type that I want to bring your attention to is called an integer. If you remember in the intro, the example of your phone number. Your phone number is an integer. It is a non-decimal number. Now, an integer can be negative or positive, but it cannot have a decimal. That is important. So if we put in here, if we make one called integer1, and we set that to, now because this isn't a string, we don't put in the quotes, only strings are put in quotes. So that is an integer. If we then put in integer2 and we make this -456, that is also an integer. And then we can echo out integer1 and concatenate that to integer2. And because it is not a string, we don't need to put in the quotes here. And this in the browser will look like this. We have 1, 2, 3, and we have -456. Very, very simple. Integer, whole numbers, positive or negative. The next data type that I want to bring your attention to is your bank account. Now, you remember I asked if you would like to double the contents of your bank account. That's because your bank account is what is known as a double or a float. These data types, they're similar to integers, but they can have decimals. Okay. Now in PHP, double and float are the same thing. In other languages, they are considered as separate data types. But in PHP, you can use double or you can use float. Now to give you an example is if we put in another variable and call it double, and we put in 10.45, and then we echo that out, echo out double, if I spell it correctly, double. Don't forget to end with a semicolon. Once we refresh, here we go, we get 10.45, and that is a double. The next data type that I would like to bring your attention to is what is known as a Boolean, sometimes referred to as a bool. A bool can only be one of two possible states, true or false. It can never be both at the same time. It can never be none. It must be one or the other. Bools are mostly used in conditional logic. Now, if you remember about the light switch example, there was a little bit of a play on words where when you want to scare someone, you say, boo, light switch. I did that trying to mash together the boo, and the first L of light switch, just to try to make it easier to remember what a bool is. If you remember boo, light switch, because I find it a lot easier to remember things in real life rather than something that's brand new. So that's the reason I said boo, light switch, is play on words for bool. So here we can write in something saying logged in, and we would set that to true. Okay, and that is a bool. Then we would echo logged in, and that in the browser, it would show a 1. The reason for this is that true evaluates to 1 and false evaluates to 0. If you wanted to get this to show true here, there is an inbuilt PHP function called var export. So what you would do is you would use the var export built-in function, and then you would input the name of the variable, which is logged in, and then this would equate in the browser to true. If we come over here to the browser and we refresh, here you go, we get true. Similarly, you would just use the var export built-in function if you wanted to evaluate to false. But remember, 1 is true and 0 is false. The next data type that I would like to bring your attention to is an array. Now, if you remember about the pantry, again, another play on words where I was saying in your pantry, remember how things are arranged, because an array stores multiple values in one variable. So it stores multiple of different items in one variable. Now, the values do not have to be of the same data type. They can be of any data type that we've already explored. Let me give you an example. So we create a variable, we know how to do that, and we set it equal to an array. And then we put the values inside curly brackets. Now, if we're using strings, so for example, we have bread in our pantry, we need to use the inverted commas. We have biscuits in our pantry, but then just to show you, we have 100. I don't know how we're going to have 100 in our pantry, but just to show you that we can use different data types within an array. Then to get that out, we do a var dump, and then we input the variable of pantry, and that will come out to the browser looking like this. Now, this is a little bit confusing if you've never seen an array before. Let's break it down. It is an array, that is the data type. It has 3 elements within the array. Now, when you're counting in arrays, the first entry is always 0. It's always counting from 0 up. So 0, 1, 2. So the first entry into the array is at 0.0, which is this bit just here, 0.0. Then the data type that it is a string. Okay, it has 5 characters within its name, and its name is bread. The second entry, 0.1 in an array, is also a string. It has 8 characters in its name. Its name is biscuits. And then the third entry, which is at point number 2, is an integer, or an int for short, and its value is 100. Now, how do we get out, if we just want to get bread, how do we get bread out? What we do is we reference its position in the array. I'll show you what I mean. So if we wanted to get just bread out, we would access the variable by using pantry, and then we use the square brackets and we put in the number within the array that we want to get out. Now bread is in position 0, if you remember, and then we need to echo that to the browser. And then that will come out to the browser as refresh bread, because we've accessed the array using its position 0, and it'll give us the value. It won't give us this, it'll only give us the value. The last data type that I would like to discuss is a double data class. It's mostly called an object, and it's the basis for object-oriented programming. Now, don't worry if this doesn't make sense, because I am going to be doing another lesson that covers objects and classes in a lot more detail, same as arrays. Essentially what you need to know is that objects and classes work together. A class is a blueprint, and the object is the copy of that blueprint. So every time we make a copy of the blueprint to create a new object, it's called instantiating. So you instantiate a copy of that blueprint. This is why I said the house you live in, it was once a blueprint. That's the class. And then from that blueprint, they made your place of residence. They made the object. Now let me just copy and paste this over. I've created a very, very simple class here. Now don't worry if this doesn't make sense. All this is doing is we've got a class. The class name is say hello. Now the details of a class go within curly brackets. Okay, if we just get rid of this for now, this is a class. So class, then the class name, and then curly brackets. Then the object is, we create it just like a variable. So we do $object. You can name this anything you want. It's equal to a new say hello. So what we're doing here is we're saying that the object variable is a new copy of this class. Then all we do in here is we just put a very simple function. So anytime that this is called, anytime we create a new object from this say hello class, it gains access to everything inside here. So you can put variables in here, you can put functions in here just like I've done. And every time you instantiate a new object from this say hello class, it has access to everything in here. So all I've done is I've created a function called hello. Again, in curly brackets, we'll learn more about functions. I'm just echoing out the words hello world. And then all we do is, now we've created the object, it has access to everything in here. So all we do is we say object hello. Now this here, this in other languages is just a dot. It's called the dot notation. In PHP, it is the minus sign followed by the less than symbol. And then hello, we're gaining access to this function, must end in parentheses, end the line. This in the browser will come out to, if we refresh the browser, it will come out to this, hello world, using an object and classes. Now, please don't worry if this doesn't make sense right now. I am going to be going through this in a lot more detail in a future lesson. It will make sense. It's just good for you to understand the basics and the concept of what a class and a object is. The final little thing that I do want to talk about is commenting in PHP. If you've done any programming language before, or you've done HTML or CSS, you know what commenting is. Very simply, in PHP, to comment out code is just 2 forward slashes. And then anything on that line afterwards is a comment. If you want to do a multi-line comment, so let's go down the bottom here and let's do comments. So that's a single line comment. If you want to do a multi-line comment, it's slash and then the asterisk, and then it's going to comment everything until you get to the preceding asterisk, and this is a multi-line comment. Essentially, if you don't know what a comment is a way for you to put notes into your code. So anything that's a comment, it's not going to be rendered by the browser. So it's a good way for you to put notes as a reminder or to put explanations for what something does. So with comments are not going to be passed by the browser. So anything that is a comment within code, it's not going to display on the web page. But I do want to just chat about something, okay? And that is over commenting of code. So if you wanted to, you could essentially write an essay in comments to explain what everything does. That is kind of defeating the purpose of what a comment is. And it's also really annoying for anyone who's going to be looking at your code afterwards, or if you come back to your code after 6 months. Because what essentially you should be doing is, if you've named your classes and your variables well, it should be easy to understand what their purpose is. So you don't need to write an essay explaining that, for example, this class or this function adds together two numbers. The two numbers we're adding together are named number 1 and number 2. Okay? If you name the function add two numbers, or you name the function addition and the variables number 1 and number 2, that's clear what it does. Okay? So please don't use comments as a reason for getting lazy with your function, class, and variable names. You should be naming them. If you watch a previous video, you should be naming them something that makes sense for its purpose. Hey, well done on making it to the end of this lesson. I know it's been a little bit longer. I'm sorry about that. And thank you so much for sticking with it. It's a really important lesson to understand data types, because data types are something that are constant through all programming and scripting languages. So it's really, really important that we explore them in detail. I will be covering classes, objects, and arrays in more detail in a future lesson, but that's for the future. So the next lesson is really exciting. We're going to be talking a little bit more in depth about concatenation, and we're going to be looking at operators. We're really starting to get into the good stuff now, so I'll see you next week.